listening to the Diablo podcast. We are online at diablopodcast.com, and this is a service of diabloinkgamers.com. I am the host, Flux, and I am joined on this show by Neinball.
Guten Tag.
And Xanth.
Hoi hoi.
And Xanth is not a regular podcast guest, but he's been playing some beta and had some thoughts, and he wanted to get another fresh voice on it. You've been doing a hardcore column on our site for a while, Xanth, yes?
Yes, I have, and you can read it every week on Friday morning.
And you started doing these when? Obviously last year.
Yeah, it was like late July, early August.
And you were probably thinking, oh, the beta's going to start pretty soon. I'll do a few months of these, and then I can be writing about the real game.
Yeah, I brought that up in the last column. I remember I was really excited, obviously, to start writing for Gamers, and then I just had the thought that 2 months of pre-release, and then by November, December, I'll be playing, and there'll be so much to talk about. I did not expect it to be January and not have a game.
Not have a release date.
How long have you been following Blizzard game development, Xanth?
Yes. I probably should have known that it would get pushed back, but I guess coming in 2.5 years, I thought perhaps maybe this one would come out a little sooner. I was wrong.
It's amazing that the more people who follow Blizzard games all the time, including myself and you and many and probably Neinball as well, we're still somehow surprised every time. Wow, no release yet. How could this has never happened before with a Blizzard game?
I think it's maybe different too, because now writing and stuff like that, I'm more aware of all the news instead of being able to kind of check out for a couple of weeks and then come back. Since you're doing it every day, you become, I guess, more aware of the time that you're spending.
I have not played a lot of beta the last few weeks because it's like, well, once you've kind of you've done every character to 13 a number of times, and it's like, well, it's just kind of boring. And just when they start getting fun, you can't play them anymore, or at least you can't play them and have any kind of challenge anymore.
Yeah, you really can't see how your character operates because, and you mentioned it in the last podcast, you go through and you hit a character, you hit a monster once and they're dead. So, I mean, how can you really get a rotation or anything going and truly understand how this character is actually supposed to work?
And it's like trying to play around with the monk, and trying to do the switching of the spirit generators,
right,
to see if you could work it out, and everything dies in the first hit.
Or like the exploding palm skill, which I'm a huge fan of when I first saw it, and then you actually get to use it in the beta, and I was so excited to use it. And it really is taken away by the fact that by the time I actually got it to work, everything around it was dead anyway.
I've played a lot of beta with just no weapons or really crappy weapons. Just, if you don't give yourself good equipment, you can kind of keep some level of testability to it, where they take 2 hits to die instead of 1 hit. So it's very, very different. Okay, one of the topics on the other podcast 2 days ago that I thought was an interesting offer and wanted to let you guys chime in on it was I was asking the two guests how their Diablo 2 character choices and play styles are translating into Diablo 3, if they find themselves doing the same kind of characters or different things that are appealing to them. And obviously it's just the beta and it's only the first 13 levels, etc. But why don't you go first on this one, Neinball, and then you can explain why you haven't played enough beta to have a proper answer, and we'll all scowl at you. Do you find the same? You played more at BlizzCons though, so at least you have some fallback point. Do you find yourself playing the same type of characters and the same things you enjoy from Diablo 2 and perhaps even World of Warcraft?
It's actually almost the opposite. It's I pretty much only exclusively played the Necromancer in Diablo 2. I tried out a Sorcerer, I tried out a Barbarian, and I just always kept falling back to a Necro. The different types of builds, whether it's a Bone or a Poison Nova, Summoner, things of that nature. And I never really played anything else, but the 2010 BlizzCon, when they had the updated monk with the spirit for the first time, I just absolutely fell in love with that. And I went back and started playing Diablo 2 with the assassin, since it was similar to the monk, and I actually started really enjoying the playing the different builds of assassins, from the melee assassins and the trappers and things like that, and even like some variant build called a rift kicker that had tons and tons of fun doing that, which I had never experienced in the previous 8 or 9 years that I had actually been playing Diablo.
And have you been playing the monk in the beta, or you just haven't had that much time to try all the characters out yet?
The few times I got to play, I've only played the monk, so that's the only one that I actually went through and tried out. And even though that I love the necromancer from Diablo II and the witch doctor is a very close clone of it, I actually don't have much. I'm not really enticed to try and play it. I have no real interest in playing a witch doctor right now.
Is that only because it's the beta and there's a limited options, or are you feeling for the full game you're just going to play monks all day?
Yeah, for the full game, it's more just kind of like looking at the monk and probably a wizard. I just haven't been really that interested in playing the witch doctor, and it's not because its abilities are comical or silly or anything like that. It's just for whatever reason I just not inclined to play it.
Okay, you're off the podcast. Okay, Xanth, same question for you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. That was the last one here from Neinball. He's not a real Diablo player.
I guess for me, I mean, my D2 playstyle was kind of all over the board. I mean, I liked a range character like a Bozan or Javazan, but at the same time, I could, go on to my druid and just, maul things to death. So when it came to actually getting into, D3, I sat at the character selection screen for a while, but ultimately the first thing I went with was a monk. Just because I really wanted to, see what the melee game was like before I, kind of sat back and, picked things off. And even, after weeks of playing it and getting bored, the monk was the class that I kept going back to. Like, I had mentioned before about killing things in one hit, it was still fun for me each and every time. And it's ironic because, like, I hated the assassin in D2. And I know it's kind of like a mix between the paladin and the assassin, but I really didn't like that class. So I thought like a quick melee fighter wouldn't be for me, but out of all of them that I've played, it still is my favorite. With the witch doctor coming in second, as opposed to Neinball, I really liked it. I like being able to throw zombies at things, and turn things into chickens. It was it's a good time, and if when I get a chance, I'll pick up the monk or the witch doctor.
Many people who have been beta testing it, I guess including the three of us just in this conversation, have pointed out that the beta gets pretty simple and pretty easy, and you're forced to kind of find alternatives and weird ways to play just to make it fun or keep any kind of a challenge to it. What do you guys think about the whole accessibility versus dumbed down versus it's too easy versus this is just the start of the game, it's supposed to be easy, etc.?
I know it's been brought up before, but with each patch, the beta does get more difficult. So they must be seeing something and changing it. And by no means is the beta, difficult now still, but compared to where it was months ago, it is more difficult. Although I would argue that getting rid of those arcane hydras made it a lot easier. And I really would like to see them back because they were just brutal. But I don't know. I guess I agree with, some of what we're hearing from Blizzard that, it is just the first 1/3 of, Act 1. But, you have all these tool tips and you're just, herded through the little, part that we're given. So it does feel really, really easy. Like at no point did I, feel like I was getting lost or, really become too overwhelmed. I don't know. I'd like to see what the other acts look like in terms of difficulty. But right now, it is a little disappointing compared to D2, where there was that challenge, almost from the get-go.
I actually was playing D2 as recently as Thanksgiving when I was going and visiting family, and the laptop couldn't run anything else. And actually, from that experience, I didn't really think that the beta in its current state, although I can't really speak for how it was earlier, is actually much different from the beginning part of Diablo 2, going up to Bloodraven. A lot of it's the same. The only real differences that I noticed is, of course, that you're chugging potions, and the rare mobs are a little bit more difficult and cause you to actually have to conserve your life and maybe run back out. The biggest thing that I noticed with that is just how boring it was to try and play a caster in the beginning.
Yeah, because you have enough mana for about 3 fireballs, and then you get to hit things with a stick.
Yeah, it's like I was playing a necromancer, and it was just kind of like I spent the whole time, just running around with my skelly and whacking things with a stick. I didn't actually get to use any of my skills. Whereas, in the beta, even though I haven't had a chance to play the witch doctor or the wizard, you actually get to always have an ability to use. You're never stuck just sitting there having to wand. You've always got a button that you can press, and that seems to be a lot more engaging, even though it is, of course, as people have pointed out, that it's probably about the same difficulty or more accessible. It's a lot more of engaging gameplay because you're using abilities and you're not actually having to just auto attack stuff until you get to level 30 or until you get your twink gear.
I would definitely agree with you on that one though, Nineball. I mean, the comparison is like looking at D2, and you're right, when you have to just sit there and auto attack for 5 minutes before something dies, and D3 where you always kind of feel like your character is a little more powerful, like it should be. Like you don't have to resort to, as you said, Flux hitting it with a stick. I did like that. I did like that, your wizard can always be shooting off, some magical spell, or the witch doctor's always got poison. And I guess that kind of made D3, a solid choice in my book.
It's true of the demon hunter as well. You have arrow skills that gain you hatred as opposed to costing, like in Diablo 2. Everything costs mana to use, and you do a lot of basic attacks. One funny point on the issue of hitting things with sticks is if you watch some of the speed runs in Diablo 3, it's actually faster to kill things by hitting them with a stick quite often in the early going. If you watch people playing wizards or other low-level, wizards or witch doctors early on, because your magic missiles and other early attacks do such little damage, people are just running past stuff, or else they're actually, they're hitting bosses with their weapon using a sword or something. But that's a fairly specialized condition. But how do you guys feel about, obviously we can only sort of project, and we hear encouraging sounds from Bashiok all the time saying, oh, it gets really hard in the higher levels, and they had that whole feature at BlizzCon last year in one of the panels where they interviewed some of the internal QA testers, and they're raving about how Inferno is just kicking their ass and it's so terribly hard, and oh my god, you have to power up beforehand. And, I'm not saying that's not the case. I mean, I certainly hope it is the case, but how do we feel there's any problems in designing a game so basically the first, 10, 12, 15 hours of the game is really going to be easy? And then once you finally get to Nightmare and then Hell, you're 40 hours in, hey, it's a challenge. Is that, given how much we talk about accessibility and, people don't have 100 hours to play video games anymore to get to the fun part, is Diablo 3 almost a throwback in that instance, or do you think you'll find sufficient fun even though you won't really be fighting for your life?
I'm the type of person that whenever I get a new game, I normally like to start off on hard, the highest difficulty that'll be available to me. So
yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah. So, I feel kind of like Ellie did on the one podcast a few months ago, that I wish that there was the opportunity there to, kind of start off on a higher difficulty, but I also understand that the game just isn't designed that way. It's designed for you to be a specific level before you go into that higher difficulty. So I can accept it for what it is. And I think that, just that first time being able to get the game, I'll have, tons of fun just because it's like, oh my God, it's finally released. It's in my hands, that I'll be able to enjoy it. But probably the second or third character through, from that point on, I'm going to be looking for rushes in order to get up to the higher difficulties where the game itself actually starts.
I would definitely agree. I mean, it kind of does hark back to Diablo 2 in that respect, where you'd want to just power through normal, and then you knew maybe once you got your character in Nightmare, you could start getting settled with, the gear you wanted to kind of, finally get you into Hell. If, it would be kind of sad that would happen in D3, and, maybe it won't. I guess I'm always looking at it from the hardcore perspective too, and maybe it'd be nice if that first part of it is, really, really easy, and then you have a level 30 character good to go for, the next difficulty. But I often wonder, how difficult is it actually going to be too? We're being told, and there was a thread like right after it was announced about people in hardcore like really, really worried how tough Inferno was going to be and stuff like that. I don't know. I guess when Blizzard says something is difficult, I guess I take it with a grain of salt, because you see it all the time with WoW too, where they say this is the hardest raid we've ever made, and then 2 days later somebody's beat it, because somebody's going to find that enough time to sit down, work out all the kinks, and put something out there so that everybody knows what they should be doing. So I guess I'm kind of a wait and see in terms of how difficult it'll actually be, but regardless, I know I'm going to sit down that first night and just play as much as I can and get out of normal, hopefully, right away.
You kind of alluded to it, but would you play hardcore right from the start if that was an option?
It's something I've been trying to lobby for, and I know there's a couple threads going now, and I think Jay Wilson had said they were 90% sure that they were going to do softcore required, just like it was originally when D2 came out, though through patches they eventually allowed you to create a hardcore from the start. I'm full for being able to make that choice. I think it is a choice. My character, my choice. Slogan maybe. But they, if I want to go through the entire first, act, having no idea what's going on, no idea what these bosses are going to do to me, and if I die, I'm dead, I think I should have that option. I know what'll happen when I die. And I think it would be more intense. I might lose 3 characters on the way past, the boss that's after the Skeleton King or what have you. But when I finally do beat them, it's going to feel a lot better, having not seen it.
I really like the comment that you had made in your most recent article, going through and saying, well, if I actually have to, toggle a choice and then accept a disclaimer about accepting the responsibilities for hardcore, why not just give that to you in the beginning instead of having to force you to go through normal?
Exactly. I mean, that's the way it was in D2. Once you finally got it unlocked, you clicked on it, then you had to click on a disclaimer. I mean, you already knew what hardcore was. You click on the disclaimer. Why not just do that right away?
Can either of you think of any logical reason you would not be able to do hardcore? I mean, what is their... They haven't really explained their thinking on this. Blizzard, they being the developers. I just don't see why they would not let us do this. I mean, what do they have to gain or lose by it?
My theory, put on your tinfoil hats, I think it might align to that accessibility issue. You take 10, 15, 20 people who accidentally click hardcore as they're rushing through to create their characters, and then they complain to Blizzard when they die right away. Maybe. I guess that's the only reason I can think of, is they don't want to field those kind of complaints. Other than that, I mean, I can't think of any reason why you wouldn't just click it as an option.
It seems like most of the developers were not real big-time, busy players of Diablo 2, and they were not hardcore players either.
Yeah.
So maybe they just don't really care. It's not really their area of interest, and they're like, well, we'll just do what Diablo 2 did. Why not? And they haven't really considered it yet.
That is kind of the feeling, is that they're just, well, this is how it worked in the previous game, and we don't really have much experience in that, so we'll just, we'll haul that over.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like information and stuff like that, we've seen a lot of stuff come out in the past couple months, but we've seen like next to nothing from hardcore. I mean, the Halls of the Dead was a cool announcement. We haven't seen any screenshots or anything like that. And then like even the corpse looting thing, like I think there was a time when Jay Wilson didn't even know that you could do that in D2. And obviously they got rid of it and what have you, and by now I can deal with it. But I think you're right. It does seem like they didn't venture too far into that realm for D2.
Another case in point, we could recall the long debate, which appears to have been settled at this point in our favor, over hardcore PvP arena mode. And they initially said, if you go into the arena, you'll die, and one player's always dead, and that's going to be so cool. and people... I mean, I termed my argument on this as the kind of the realist versus the idealist, and that's an ideal, and it would be cool if it happened, but nobody will ever duel if that's the case.
Right.
And that I thought they needed to have some sort of a sparring mode or something. And Blizzard really didn't say much about that for a long time, and I guess they really haven't confirmed it yet. But they did say they were looking. I think they said they were leaning towards allowing some sort of non-permanent death duel option for hardcore players.
Right, but who knows? Maybe in 2 weeks they decide they will. But yeah, at the moment, nothing. But who knows?
And that just sort of seemed to be the same kind of logic, where it's like they never really tried dueling with hardcore in Diablo 2, and didn't realize that hardly anybody ever did it, even after the game was 10 years old.
Right.
So they just weren't familiar with the milieu or the genre of things.
Yeah, there was I think there was a post from, it was either Bash or one of the developers a couple months ago that was talking about the possibility of, having the option of whether you wanted to have the permadeath or not before you actually queued. I think that would be like the best solution to it, is if you those few insane individuals that for whatever reason do want, permanent death in hardcore PvP can go ahead and try it, and everyone else will at least be able to experience it and enjoy that aspect of gameplay with the game mode that they want without being worried about losing their character every time that they queue.
So maybe we'll get the same thing with the having to make a hardcore character or softcore character before you can make hardcore, and they'll kind of get worn down by the reality of fan complaints. Who says they're not responsive to fan desires? Okay, I said that. Most people in the beta, I think, Bashiak has said, play solo, a few times and quit. And even if they don't, you're playing solo and doing item runs and such. And there's not a whole lot of multiplayer playing in the beta. Have you guys, in your play experience, I think everybody kind of goes solo at first just to kind of, soak in the atmosphere and stuff. But have you tried multiplayer and single player, and how do they compare?
You're right. I did start solo, and just to try out the characters right away and not have to worry about different games, but it almost felt like a chore to get into a multiplayer game. Like you have to go through a couple windows and then finally you wait a little bit and then you're there. And then there's nothing. It almost does feel like a solo game where there's 3 other people running around. I think out of all the multiplayer games I played, because I did a column a while back where I was trying to simulate hardcore, where I would if I died I would delete my character and I'd only play in multiplayer games. And like I think out of all the games I played, and there had to have been hundreds, there was maybe 2 times where people actually talked to each other. And I think it was to insult each other and call each other idiots or, whatever.
That's strange on the internet.
Yeah. I haven't seen that on Battle.net before.
Who would have thought on
never.
On an online game people would be rude to each other?
That is appalling.
But I mean, it was kind of sad because coming from having 8 people in a game in D2 and remembering obviously when it was at its height, yeah, you had some spammers, but for the most part you had people who were like, hey, I'm on this quest, let's go kill the maggot king or queen. It's been a long time. And
noob.
Maybe the maggot king will be in D3.
And the skeleton queen was tough too.
But you would join up and you would talk to these people and you'd be like, oh, that was great, let's go play again. And I just didn't get any of that sense, where eventually it was just like, man, it'd just be so much easier if I walked into a solo game and just did what I wanted to do. Because there were maybe a handful of times when we're all fighting together, and maybe that's just due to the ease, and you can just plow through monsters even in a 4-player game and you don't need each other. But it was really kind of disheartening.
You want to jump in there, Neinball?
Yeah, I didn't do any public multiplayer games, but I did do a full clear through with a friend of mine. That we did a 2-player game and went from start to finish, and that was that even though I had already beaten the game, I think we were both level 9 or 10. And everything, was just dying in a single hit. But one of the things I was noticing as I was playing the monk and he was playing the demon hunter, he had a hard time keeping up with me because I'm just using dashing strike to clear the entire length of the screen from one mob pack to the other, and everything was just dying in a single crippling wave, even when everything is supposed to have double the amount of hit points in a 2-player game, to where it actually he was. By the time that we got to the Skeleton King, it wasn't as bad, but I think as we're in Cathedral 2, he was, complaining that it's kind of like, why am I even here?
You're just so rock sort the game that he couldn't, no kid can keep up.
Well, yeah, he was trying to keep up, but even with Vault, Dashing Strike is just such an amazing skill, because if you have something that you can target, it has no range limitation. The Dashing Strike will even, you clear across multiple chasms in order to, I guess it's not so much that you're so much higher level than the mobs in the beta. It's just that your gear matters so much more, even at those lower levels.
It's funny because they've talked so much. Jay Wilson especially has talked many times in the interviews about how he wants it to be so easy to create a game, and if you play with a game with one party, he wants like a one button click. We're all going to try a new game together and just keep playing together, to reset the dungeons or something. And obviously that's not yet in the beta, and from what Xanth has to say, it's not even close to what's in the beta. But there are some major problems with multiplayer in the beta test, which are kind of what you just described, Neinball, and that it's really easy. You don't need other people. Most people are not friends. You don't know each other. You're just in a pug, and everyone kind of runs their own direction trying to find the stairs.
The biggest thing that I noticed too was when I would die, it was predominantly because of other people. Especially, before they patched them out, somebody runs in and you're lagging a little bit behind them, and they've just hit, an arcane mob or, the fire one or what have you. And then you run into it and you just get, blasted by them without really knowing. And, especially if you're a little bit lower level, and you're dead. And obviously, death doesn't happen too often in the beta. But, thinking from the hardcore perspective, it seemed like I was safer playing by myself as opposed to with other people.
One of the things that I've long been kind of wondering about in multiplayer in Diablo 3 is that there were, the developers have often said, we want, do no harm to multiplayer. It's like one of their design mottos. Or do no harm to co-op is what they've really said. And there are some features like, individual loot drops is obviously a big thing, and no more PK switch are things that were big annoyances to playing multiplayer in D2. But I haven't really seen any real improvements in co-op. I mean, they've taken out things that sucked about co-op, but they've also seemed to have taken out almost all of the skills that were really beneficial in parties. I mean, if you play with a paladin in Diablo 2, it was like, oh, this is so awesome. He's got fanaticism, and I'm massively faster with my attacks. Or, they're using conviction and you've got you can do much more damage with your spells now. Or, barbarians had really useful party boosting war cries, and you love to have a necromancer around because his curses would really make things easier. And it just doesn't seem like there is a lot of equivalent of that in Diablo 3 in terms of really party boosting spells or things that are really useful debuffs for everybody.
At this point, we're just a little bit too low level to really even begin to experience that, because if there's no challenge and you're one-shotting everything and nothing has any realistic chance of killing you, even if what was it? The one person, put up a video of he killed the Skeleton King simply through, thorns and the retribution mantra of retribution. He didn't do anything. He just passively killed the Skeleton King. And it's like, since there's no real threat or challenge, you can't really gauge how well any debuffs or anything like that are going to happen, because in the PvP arena in the BlizzCon 2011, those debuffs made a huge difference when you're actually going through and attacking people. If the monk was able to stun somebody or get a slow off with his mantra, if you had a barbarian on your team, they would just get up there and, just go to town, and you'd have a corpse laying there in a few seconds. The debuffs in that game, especially the Witch Doctor with the Hex those were game changers. So I think
once somebody got chickened, everyone else just said, dog pile.
Yeah. So, I think that really is just one of those things you can't effectively gauge at this level in the game. But, just from the brief experience with PvP at max level, it was a world of difference having those different buffs and debuffs.
Not in particular about the buffs and debuffs. I will definitely, agree. I think at this level, if you're cutting your damage in half, but, it goes from 2 to 1. So, what's the real big deal? But I guess the thing that was on my mind is, you go back to D2 and you had, chat channels and stuff like that, which, you're in a chat room with a bunch of other people, and, you got conversation going on and people, talking about, hey, come join this game or what have you. And you don't really have that in D3. I think that enhances like the disconnect to make it feel more like a solo game.
They have friends lists, but many people don't have all their friends in the beta, obviously. So
right, and
even friends list, it's like it encourages you to play with people you know, but what will that do to get you to meet new people?
Yeah, and then you're stuck going back into the other, find a random game type thing, and nobody's talking, so you don't meet anybody that you like. And then you just kind of cycle back, and that's, that was the main thing for me, was that's where it almost like became instinctive to just play a solo game, because what was the point? And there was nobody advertising like, hey, I'm this level, let's go do this or something like that. But I don't know. Maybe there's something that they're hiding that we'll see in release, but I guess that just enhanced the disconnect for me.
Another thing that I meant to mention in my earlier soliloquy was that the biggest benefits to playing multiplayer in Diablo 2 were you got much more experience and many more item drops. And you don't get more item drops and you don't get more experience, at least not very much, in Diablo 3. And you don't really care about experience in Diablo 3 because you're going to max out at 60 by the time you get through hell anyway. It's not like that long-term grinding process like it was in D2. And sure, I'm sure it'll be great to be level 50 instead of 45 at the same point in the game. It'd be much more powerful, but it doesn't seem like that. That was. I mean, I always played in multiplayer games in D2 back when they were still available and not full of bots and hacks and everything. But because you just want, it was too easy in single, but you wanted that big experience. I mean, I used to love joining cow level games, and I would go do bale runs in cow games, just so I could have the 8 times experience and play by myself through bale areas with powerful like boazons and stuff in hardcore. And there's just no reason to do that in Diablo 3 because you're already maxed out on experience anyway, or at least you will be by the time you're anywhere near the end game. You wonder if the whole removal of the experience grinding is going to be a detriment to co-op.
Then it almost seems to negate you get your own drops because, again, it's like you're by yourself. So what's the point?
Yeah, the only real benefit to other people in drops now is just that they can open all the barrels and chests much more quickly, and you may get a drop from a barrel they open, just the same as if you'd opened it. But if everybody's in a whole different part of the dungeon, that doesn't really help much.
No.
Yeah, especially if they're outside of the little window that you have to actually get the drops from the things that they're killing. And I think the only benefit to playing in a multiplayer game, from what Bashiok said, is just the fact that you'll kill faster. And, that was the extent of it. So that way, you'll get more items per time invested because you're killing faster. But that was the end of it.
Yeah, and that's a hard argument to sell during the beta test.
Yeah.
Faster? I mean, what do you want, smart bombs? I mean, it's pretty much I mean, a lot of times in the beta, it feels like you're like a high-level paladin with Holy Shock or something in level 1, in Act 1 of Diablo 2, You just run through and everything's dead on the edge of the screen before you even see it.
I think
it's like, hey, we win again. Ellie and I keep talking about playing a game together. She needs to get the video stuff set up on her end. Like, we do a podcast and, just kind of record the full playthrough, and then we just chat and make jokes and stuff, and then post the highlights. I've only played Pugs so far, where I've just joined with other people, basically strangers. I think it'd be much more fun if you both have level 1 characters and you just make an agreement and say, we're going to stay on the same screen and try to play co-op, try to actually help each other even if we don't need the help, as opposed to just rushing through and it becomes this Darwinian struggle like you're just playing with a stranger almost. You guys envision when Diablo 3 comes out, are you going to play with friends? I mean, you have all these guild mates in World of Warcraft, Neinball. Do you have plans to, hey, the 4 of us are going to play through, or are you just going to be on there, at 4 in the morning by yourself, clicking furiously?
Well, that's the thing that we've been actually talking about a lot lately. Most recent Ray Dragon Soul has actually been getting boring very quickly, much more than we were expecting it to. So a lot of us are kind of like looking forward to Diablo 3 more than we thought we would be. And we're already starting to talk about trying to form groups because there'll be people like myself that my very first time playing the beta is I stopped and I clicked everything. I killed everything. I talked to every person multiple times. Every time that a section of the quest got updated, I would go back to town and see if anybody's voices changed or if they had any new dialogue or anything like that. So in my guild, I'm going to be one of the slower people going through and playing the game. So we're trying to match people up with the ones that don't care about dialogue and they just want to beat the game and they want to get max level and start grinding Inferno, and then the other people that are going to start off fully exploring and seeing every looking under every little nook and cranny, wanting to talk to every NPC multiple times and just experience the whole game. So that was one of the things that we're doing to try and get people together in groups that could experience it like that.
So is that your first time through, or just kind of in the early going? You guys want to match up, but you're not thinking literally the first time you ever play the game it's going to be by yourself.
No, yeah, even the first time that I play the game, it's probably going to be in a group of a couple other of my friends.
Oh, how sharing.
Sharing
You're
is
like
caring.
you're like BFFs. What do you think about that, Xanth?
Um, yeah, it's gonna sound like a pity party. I don't have any friends who are interested in Diablo 3. I'm the only one.
You could come
Aww.
play. You could come play with us. We could fit you into a group because we got like probably like 12 people that are going and playing the game.
Not many of my, real life friends are interested, but I've always loved just jumping into a random game and going from there. And if on release night, we do find out it is the softcore before hardcore, then it wouldn't even matter to me because I wouldn't be looking to play with my friends. I'd be looking to get through softcore as quickly as I could.
Just the mega rush.
Exactly. Just find the person who's the furthest ahead and ask them to help me as quickly as possible. I think, the thing about hardcore too is, like I'm used to losing characters left and right. And, sometimes just a little bit easier, to get started on your own, especially after you've just died, as to, maybe not drag down the other people who are still trying to level to, whatever, to 60 or, D2 to, 90 or whatever they wanted. So I guess I've always been comfortable, going solo for a little bit.
There was generally, in my experience, there was a little more camaraderie in hardcore games in D2 than there were in softcore games, because it mattered if you died, for one thing, and people were a little more willing to share items and equipment and communicate. And then, of course, we got TP, PKs, and all that went away. But in theory, in Diablo 3, we're not going to have hacks, and there's no non-consensual PvP. There's no PK modes. So you wonder if people in hardcore will be a little more friendly and assisting, especially if Inferno and Hell are as hard as they keep claiming.
Right.
You'll really need to play with friends, and since they can't kill you, and since they can't steal your item drops, then maybe it'll actually be pretty good, pretty fun.
Well, I guess the one thing that I'm concerned about is because you can't name your game. I mean, I was thinking about, those times when you died, you just throw up a game that said, just died, lost to level, 75 or something like that, and somebody might come in and, give you something if you hadn't been muling away your stuff. And obviously, the shared stash is going to help in D3. But, if I just create a random game at the beginning, starting, with the Meteor quest, no one's going to walk into that game and know that I just lost, a level 60 in Inferno or something like that. They're just going to think I'm starting out. And I might be able to relate, a pity story or something, but for the most part, they're not going to know or care.
Aww. The general atmosphere, graphics, theme, mood, goriness, horror effects, there's vomiting zombies, there's gruesome, bloody heaps of bodies. And that's just on the way to this toy store to make your pre-order. In the actual game, how do you guys feel about... You don't get to answer this, Neinball, because you play World of Warcraft, and as everyone knows, that's just full of clowns and rainbows and happy things. So
And
Sparkle dragons.
yeah, sparkle ponies as well. How do you feel about the overall mood and theme and such? You'd kind of seen the game before at BlizzCons, but now that you've had a little more time to sink into the experience. So what do you think about the mood, and compare D2 to D3 and also to Sparkle Dragon?
I really like the art style that they went with. It really, fits. You walk by and everything has kind of like just a painted feel to it, but there's a very, dark mood and everything, even when you're in, Tristram, they're burning the corpses and things like that. I felt that the mood fit very well. And, I have a rather old graphics card, so I had to take the settings down quite a bit in order to get it to play smoothly. But even at that setting, I mean, everything was amazing. Everything was, rendered in very high detail. And I remember like just going and running through, I think it was like Caton's house or whatever. And I noticed that all of the candles have a little stream of smoke coming out of it that you can notice if you actually stop and take the time to see it, that all those like very little details, made the environments feel very rich. And there's a lot of the dialogue is meant to be kind of humorous from the NPCs. There wasn't really any sense of urgency or anything like that. But then again, a lot of the dialogue in Diablo 2 was also meant for nothing more than humor, like Geed or dang it, I can't remember the drunk's name in Act 2. But there's like my favorite, who doesn't even have a name, is the drunk in the tavern in New Tristram. He's got a lot of funny things that he says.
What do you think, Xanth?
Definitely would agree. I mean, I had never gone to BlizzCon. I prior to the beta had only seen videos, and having that to go off of, jumped in and I was immediately impressed. Was it you, Flux, who had said it's like playing in an oil painting or something like that?
I think that was Jay Wilson, actually.
All right, well, I guess so. I'm
often mistaken for him, though. But
and I guess maybe perhaps that was an apt analogy. I really did like the visual style. And one thing that really stood out to me was just the characters in the world that you were actually, inhabiting. I remember in D2, you'd be in, these little towns, or like even, in Act 2, you're in this gigantic town and there's like 5 people in it. You go into, New Tristram, and like you have little houses you can go in, you see people living and you see people talking and all that. And I guess it just made it seem more real. And I think to me that really enhanced the game. As much as you can argue about believability in a game where you can shoot fire out of your hands, including people in town really sealed it for me.
And we've only seen a little tiny portion of it. They've shown much bigger towns. We've seen lots of screens from Chaldeum in the Act 2 town, which is like this huge desert city, hopefully with more than 5 people in it this time. And in 2014, when they finally finish it, we should really enjoy that.
Looking forward to it.
Speaking of other elements, comparing to the other games, there's obviously a lot of things in Diablo 3 that are sort of homages or reflections back upon interesting tidbits from D2 and especially from Diablo 1. We get to revisit Tristram. We see Griswold's shop there, Adria's shack, the Skeleton King, obviously. How do you guys getting weepy, nostalgic feelings from all of the cool? How do you feel like they're handling these elements?
I think it's being done well. I'm not a huge lore guy, but I do feel like I know a decent amount about Diablo's lore, and I guess I like the harking back to Diablo 1. I feel like D2 didn't do as much about that. You figure it was kind of a big deal, and obviously the Dark Wanderer and what have you. But yeah, going back and seeing like Adria, this random character from D1 that you didn't really even hear about in D2, or spoiler, finding Werev's corpse and his journal.
Bleep. I'll believe that. I believe that just everything but the corpse part. Like, who, what, where, what?
Oh.
But yeah, seeing those little things, and because that's what happens with a sequel. You always wonder what happened to those people before.
Sorry for interrupting, but I actually really liked that that tile set of if you actually get Werev's corpse to spawn, because it looks as if he was just killed, because he has all of his food and his bedding and stuff just spread out. He's actually got a pig over the fire that he's cooking. It's like he just was coming through the area back to New Tristram, didn't realize all the dead were alive, got he made camp and then got killed like a little bit before he actually got out there, that he was just about to make it to Tristram to see Cain.
If you weren't talking to everybody in town, you could have saved him. No, but I'll definitely agree. I think it's a cool little feature. Obviously, we had like Wirt's leg and a little harking back in D2, with the zombie Griswold and what have you. But it almost feels like D3 is really reinvigorating the lore into the story, and going back and obviously fighting the Skeleton King and stuff like that is great.
We're telling Max Schaefer, how come the layout is so different of Tristram in D2 versus D1? He's like, is it really? Like, they hadn't even really compared it exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's roughly similar. I mean, there's still the well in the middle of town and stuff. But, of course, there's no cathedral.
Right, or Adria's shack area.
Yeah, it just kind of ends over there. But then in Diablo 3, it's like, I mean, it says it's old Tristram, but it's like totally different in shape and layout. You get to it in a different way. The river's gone. There's not a... There's no Adria's shack is still there, but it's 5 times further away than it used to be.
Right.
And possibly, there's been some really strong seismic activity in the last 20 years, and it's, stretched things like the San Andreas Fault. But would you guys have liked if they'd actually made it obviously it would have been upgraded graphics and stuff, and they could have added some ruins here and there. But I think it would have been more fun if it had really felt like stepping back into the same city, same town from Diablo 1 for the 4 people alive who played that game.
But I think if they would have done that, I mean, like, the cathedral was what? I mean, 20, 30 feet away from the town.
Yeah.
And then, people would be complaining that, like, oh, that's all I have to do. I show up here and I walk, 20 feet. So I think they wanted those areas where they could stretch out the journey from the town to the actual cathedral. Put in, I guess, a little more danger and, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess it's something that I didn't really think of that much, because I remember when I saw the gameplay videos that showed Old Tristram for the first time, I was just impressed that they actually put in the Pilroyan cage that Cain was stuck in Diablo 2. That's still sitting over there by the well.
Mm-hmm.
That they actually they did take the time to go through and try and make things fit, but yeah, obviously they did change around a lot of it, the layout and such, in order to make it work with the vision of that area of the game that they're going with now.
And we don't think that we're going to see any other areas that were just like they were in Diablo 2. I mean, we're not going to, we're kind of visiting the barbarian highlands, but we're not going to see Haragath or Haragaroth, whatever it was called.
There's actually one thing that I was kind of interested in with that about places that you might be revisiting, is that even though I believe it is, like in Diablo 2, if you look at the map of Sanctuary that they have up on, Diablo 3, where Act 1 takes place is very far away from Tristram, and that's why you have to take the portal in order to get there. Mm-hmm. But in one of the interviews that the author of the new Diablo comic was mentioning, is that they actually wanted to take the story to the Forgotten Tower, in the Black Marshes. But he was told that he couldn't, because the events that would happen in the story in the comic would alter, the area. It's apparently some sort of big event that would be noticeable. And they said that they couldn't do that because, that's going to make its way into the game, or something about the Forgotten Tower actually being put into the game. Yet, no one's found anything in the data mining that would suggest that we ever actually, revisit the Forgotten Tower, at least in Act 1. Or even go in anywhere near that area from the the original Act 1 in Diablo 2. That was just like one of those interesting things that I had caught in one of the interviews that they had done.
Yeah, I really did like a lot of those journals that you could pick up, and then the voiceovers that would accompany on like Danon and was it Lazarus? Yeah, and then Leoric's journals too. I mean, harking back again to that Diablo 1 storyline and just kind of fleshing it out a little bit more. Really, it was nice. It was kind of a nice little background too, as you're going around, destroying all these demons that inhabit the cathedral as well.
So any last points, guys? We've gone plenty long enough.
I guess, I think this gets brought up, especially in the comments, after these podcasts. I think it's something that we can probably all agree on, that you do get bored of the beta. And I know there are people out there who are dying to play it. I was one of them too. But it just happens. You just, you love the game and you're going to buy it and you're going to enjoy it. But, after getting to level 13, 5, 10, 15 times, eventually you run out of stuff to do and don't view it as like, we're insulting anybody who doesn't have it. But it's just one of those things that runs its course after a while. And it's not like you lose excitement. It's just you run out of things to do.
Yeah, it's just such a limited scope that you can't really, get a feel for it. And there's not the big things like trying to get, magic find for PvP or in order to take on a higher difficulty. There's just a very finite amount of stuff that you can get, and most of all, the best stuff that you can get. I think they pointed this out in the last podcast, was that the majority of your best gear is going to come from crafting. So there isn't even really much point in trying to stack some magic find and go kill the mobs, or re-roll new characters just to kill the Skeleton King. There's not a lot to do.
Right. I mean, even in the D2 open beta, like I remember the thing that everybody was doing was just going around looking for gems. Like there was still that. Like you could still at least find that, and that would make you better. But I think, if I recall, you could duel each other too.
It was just a normal game. You could PK switch whenever you wanted.
Yeah, so there at least was that, but lacking those kind of abilities, I mean, you can only kill the Skeleton King so many times. That's a question for you guys. I mean, having played it, both having played D2, there are still people right now playing D2, and what do you think the survival rate is of D3? I mean, obviously we haven't seen the complete game yet, but do you envision yourself in 10 years' time being able to pick this game up still?
Did anyone envision themselves playing D2 for 10 years in the year 2000, though?
With D2, I always thought, oh, I'll find something else, but I still find myself going back to it.
Yeah, every once in a while you just get that itch, and you want to go back and play, and it's like one of those games that even though it's 10 years old, you mentioned to some buddies, it's like, hey, you want to go play Diablo 2, and you don't get the response of, oh, that game's so old. You get the response of, I haven't played that forever. Yeah, let's do it. And then you've got a group of friends that are on there. You're chatting on Skype or Vent, and you're going and you're rushing your way through Act 1. Throwing yourself in Andariel and, corpse running back and stuff like that, and just having a good time. It was like just the game was well made, and I think, time will only tell if Diablo 3 is going to have that hold on people to where if, 4 or 5 years from now, once the last expansion, last new, added content is added, in there, and so you can really only gauge the game on, what is there, whether people are going to, year like 2020, am I going to go back to Diablo 3 and one of those throwbacks? It's kind of like, hey guys, let's go play Diablo 3, or is it going to be go play Diablo 2? I haven't played that in years.
I don't think they will let 8 years pass before getting a sequel announced either. I think we'll get Diablo 4 a lot sooner after the last expansion than we got Diablo 3. Okay, guys, thanks for your time and enjoy your beta testing.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah,
it's good to be back.
Yeah, you guys have been listening to the Diablo Podcast, and we are online at diablopodcast.com. Bye.
Bye.
Moo.
Adios. Moo.
Moo.